Coming up, Luka puts up a historic stat line and the Wizards somehow overcome Joel Embiid's big night. This is Locked On Game to Game NBA.
Every game, every team, every angle. Locked On Game to Game, your team every day.
Welcome in. You're listening to Locked On Game to Game NBA, local experts going over the biggest stories on the hardwood. I'm your host, Kainani Stevens. Thank you for making Locked On your first listen every single weekday. Luka Doncic doing absolutely superhuman things. He's now the only NBA player to ever record a triple-double by scoring 60 points and grabbing 20 rebounds. Also added in 10 assists there. He also scored the game-tying bucket with 1 second left in regulation, and he willed his team to an overtime win. Locked On Mavs and Locked On Knicks have a ton to talk about after Luka's big night.
I don't know if I can explain what I just watched. The Dallas Mavericks get the win. Nick Angstead from the Locked On Mavericks podcast here. Luka Doncic, the first time ever someone goes off for 60 points, 21 rebounds, 10 assists. He's 23 years old. Absolutely insane night from Luka. He was just hitting on not even all levels. Only took 6 threes, only hit 2 of them. He was dealing in the pick and roll. The Knicks decided not to double him. It's like the first time all season that a team has decided not to double Luka for the entire game, and he put up 60 points. Also, the Mavericks were down by 9 points with like 27 seconds left to go. In instances where a team is up by 9 with 27 seconds left to go in the last 20 seasons, teams are 0 and 13,884 until this Dallas Mavericks team just beat the Knicks.
For the second time in a week, the Knicks end up losing a game late that they had let in thanks to some horrible late game execution and lack of free throw making. Alex Wolf here from Locked On Knicks, and it's a shame too that happened, because even though Luka Doncic had a 60-point triple-double, the Knicks really had some guys step up. Jalen Brunson was out for this game with a hurt right hip. RJ Barrett was out very quickly, a minute and change into the game with a finger injury. And Quentin Grimes really stepped up with 33 points. Emmanuel quickly steps in the starting lineup with 15 assists. Julius Randle had a fantastic game. Mitchell Robinson had a fantastic game. Unfortunately, those guys ran out of steam and couldn't execute late because of the coaching of one Tom Thibodeau, who ran them all into the ground. So maybe it's time to start having a conversation about Tom Thibodeau again. But that's something for Locked On Knicks, which we will be getting into. Be sure to check out Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast.
A full team effort for Phoenix helped them overcome some injury troubles to take down the Grizzlies on the road. Locked On Suns is happy to see the roster thriving without some of their stars.
John Morant said he was fine with the Western Conference. It didn't seem that way on Tuesday. Brendan Clean here with Locked On Suns coming to you after a 125-108 win by the Suns over Memphis, getting redemption less than a week after the Suns suffered a big blowout loss to the Grizzlies. No Devin Booker. Absences piling up for this Suns team, but they had 8 people in double figures, 17 of 31 from deep, and 26 assists. Meanwhile, they win the rebounding battle, and so Memphis does not have its normal tricks. Their half-court offense is often poor. It was again tonight, but they did not get those offensive rebounds they're used to. They couldn't make a 3 themselves, and they turned the ball over 14 times to just 18 assists. So despite 34 for Morant, he is one of only 2 Grizzlies to get into double digits, whereas the Suns had 8 of those players. For more on these Suns, listen to Locked On Suns wherever you get podcasts.
Klay Thompson, turning back the clock, had a bit of a vintage performance to help the Warriors defeat the Hornets last night. Locked On Warriors goes over how the Dubs got it done at home.
The Warriors homestand remains perfect, and the team is now just 1 game below 500. I'm Cyrus Sauces with your Locked On Warriors, Locked On Now recap of the Golden State Warriors defeating the Charlotte Hornets 110-105, staving off a late-game rally by the Hornets, thanks in large part to Klay Thompson, who's starting to show signs of consistent life tonight, scoring 29 points to lead the Warriors. Jordan Poole, another magnificent performance, filling in for Stephen Curry, despite an off night from shooting in three-point land, going just 1 for 7, still scored 24 points, still dished out 6 assists, and down the stretch to fend off a furious Charlotte Hornets rally, it was Jonathan Kuminga coming up with huge plays as he scored 14 points, grabbed 6 boards. The Warriors play the Utah Jazz tomorrow at home, the second half of a back-to-back. Follow the program on Twitter @LockedOnDubs.
Coming up, the Lakers snap a skid and the Wizards pull off the upset. This is Locked On Game to Game NBA. Today's edition of Game to Game is brought to you by Prize Picks. It's the super simple way for you to play daily fantasy sports. What you do is you pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their Prize Picks projections, you can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. You are not competing against anybody else. You are just going against those projections. So download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com. You can sign up there to play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match of up to $100 with our promo code LOCKEDON. If you deposit $100, Prize Picks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, Prize Picks will give you $50. So don't forget to enter that promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match of up to $100. Welcome back to Locked On Game to Game NBA. I'm your host, Kainani Stevens. Thank you for making Locked On your first listen every weekday. LeBron James scored 28 points. Russell Westbrook got a triple-double, and the Lakers snapped their losing streak by taking down the Orlando Magic. Locked On Lakers and Magic both look at the final from Orlando.
This is Andy Kamenetsky, co-host of Locked On Lakers podcast, and the Lakers win 129-110 over the Magic, snapping a 4-game losing streak, and LeBron James led the way with 28 points, but it was a really nice, balanced effort from the Lakers that prevented LeBron from having to carry everything. 5 other Lakers in double figures, including Thomas Bryant with 21 points, Troy Brown had 15 off the bench, and Russell Westbrook, his 3rd triple-double as a Laker off the bench, tying Detlef Schrempf for most triple-doubles all time in NBA history off the bench. I have a feeling Russ will be passing that at some point this season, establishing his own record. A lot more to get into, so make sure you are subscribing to Locked On Lakers YouTube channel and that you make Locked On Lakers your first listen wherever you get your podcasts.
The Orlando Magic simply did not have the energy to defeat the Los Angeles Lakers, and the Lakers pummeled them for it. This is Philip Rossman-Reich, the host of Locked On Magic, as the Orlando Magic fall to the Los Angeles Lakers 129-110 in just a disappointing effort considering how well the Magic have played over the last 2 weeks. But this game cannot be about this game. It's about this stretch of play, and it's about the consistency this team brings. For the first time in a long time, the Magic just didn't have the energy to play well. Even with a couple days off, even with a long layoff since their last game on Friday, the Magic just did not match the Lakers' intensity, focus, energy, urgency, everything you could think of. They didn't play their game, and just a cascading effect of the Lakers making 3-point shots, Paolo Banchero in foul trouble, and the Magic unable to find their rhythm offensively hurt them in this one. This is a stretch where the Magic have to pick up wins, and the consistency is the key for this team. This team has to learn how to bring the same effort, the same energy, the same intensity, the same urgency every single night, especially against teams with poor records. That's where they are, and that's what they have to do.
Joel Embiid scored 48 points on Tuesday night, but the Philadelphia 76ers could not extend their win streak to 9 games. Instead, the Wizards picked up a win in D.C. Locked On Wizards has more about that surprising victory.
What's good, everybody? It's your boy Brandon Scott again from Locked On Wizards. The Washington Wizards get a victory tonight at home, 116-111 against the Philadelphia 76ers, and thus ending their 8-game winning streak. But who stepped up tonight? It was Kristaps Porzingis providing 24 points, 10 rebounds. But who also stepped up? It was the Wizards bench. The Wizards bench outscored the 76ers bench, and behind a solid game behind Rui Hachimura, 14 points. Now, the 76ers, Joel Embiid did score 40-plus points. But how did the Wizards win this game, even though he scored that many points? Well, they allowed him to do whatever he wanted, but charged the rest of the 76ers to step up and help him out, and they couldn't. Outside of James Harden, who in the fourth quarter got some good calls and got to the free throw line, but they couldn't respond. So it's a much-needed win for the Wizards. Everybody, have a good night, and peace.
Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown doing it again. They combined for 77 points in a win over the Rockets last night. Locked On Celtics recaps that blowout win in Boston.
A classic good team versus a bad team game here at the TD Garden. Good team wins by 24 points. I'm John Corral from the Locked On Celtics podcast. This is a game where we call it playing with your food. The Celtics did just enough to hold a 7-8 point lead throughout a bunch of this game. The Rockets had an early lead, but they didn't play great. The Celtics relied on a bunch of jumpers, but when they needed to, when they wanted to, they pulled ahead. and played the way they were supposed to. Early on, too many three-pointers and the threes weren't falling. Second half, they started to because the Celtics were attacking and getting to the rim and kicking out. And when you get 39 points from Jaylen Brown and 38 points from Jayson Tatum, you're going to win a lot of games if you're the Boston Celtics. You combine for 77 points from those guys, the Celtics don't lose a whole lot. And that's basically the story of this game. The Celtics relied on their stars. Only one other guy, Robert Williams, scored in double figures. It was kind of a blah game throughout. And the Celtics, the good team, did what they had to do to pull away late. You put in just enough effort to get the 20-point win, to get a little bit of garbage time. And now get ready for the LA Clippers. That's the game they were looking ahead to anyway. 3 wins in a row for the Boston Celtics. Can they now make it 4, heading out on a road trip after that Clippers game?
The Pacers bench dominated against the Hawks last night, scoring 52 points to help Indiana pick up a 15-point win. Locked On Hawks and Locked On Pacers have more on how it all went down.
Pacers get back on track once again. This is what they do. They bounce back from miserable games like the one they had on Monday in New Orleans where they lost by 20. They host the Hawks on Tuesday and crush a decent Atlanta Hawks team. I'm Tony East, the host of Locked On Pacers, and the Pacers finally had a good bench game against Atlanta. They win by 15, 129-114, but finally, all their bench players at the same time had a good night. Ben Mathurin, 18 points on 10 shots. TJ McConnell was hitting shots. He had 6 points and 6 assists. Jalen Smith had 9 points and 7 rebounds. O'Shea Brissett had 16 points. Off the bench was a plus 28. The Pacers bench has not been good this season. It was huge for them against Atlanta, so yes, Buddy Hield had 28 points and was on fire from deep. Yes, Tyrese Halliburton put the game away in the fourth quarter again, but the story for this one for the Pacers was their bench finally stepping up. We'll have all that and more on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
Hello friends, my name is Brad Rowland, and the Atlanta Hawks fall at the hands of the Indiana Pacers on this Tuesday evening. Final score of 129-114, and the Hawks simply could not get stops defensively, and the big issue on this night was perimeter point of attack defense. The Hawks were basically letting the Pacers get wherever they wanted to on the perimeter. Tyrese Halliburton, Buddy Hield, TJ McConnell, you name it. Everyone got to where they wanted in this game for the Hawks, and with the already weakened back end of the defense with Clint Capella out, DeAndre Hunter out for the Hawks, John Collins did his best. Onyeka Okongwu had some nice moments, but the Hawks were shorthanded, and defensively it was just not good enough on this night. Offensively wasn't necessarily pretty either all the way through. There was a season high for John Collins, but very few positives other than that, and the Hawks now face a difficult challenge on Wednesday coming back home. That's at least on the small bright side there, but they will face the Brooklyn Nets, the hottest team in the NBA. They've won 9 games in a row, and the Hawks will have to get that victory in order to avoid dipping below 500 once again at this point in the season. We'll have full coverage and more on Locked On Hawks podcast.
That's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Game to Game NBA. I'm your host, Kainani Stevens. Thank you so much for making Locked On your first listen every single weekday. Make sure you are subscribed to Locked On NBA and, of course, your favorite team's Locked On podcast, both on YouTube and wherever else you get your podcasts from. I'm Kainani Stevens. This has been Locked On Game to Game.